Thanks, Madam Acting President. It's interesting listening to the debate so far, and I thought, like others, that we would have come into the chamber today, particularly given the time frame involved. So notice was given by the Honourable Peter Collier of this motion back on the 22nd of October, so some 2 weeks ago. And I would have thought that in that time, the government would have perhaps pitched up this afternoon rather, and tabled something. I mean, I think we got one letter. No, it was actually two. It was a letter and a statement from the WA Chief Health Officer, which I think was sort of like a media response. But it was interesting. One of the two items that was tabled by the Leader of the House was this letter dated the 28th of October. And it's an interesting, I want to make this observation, Madam Acting President, that it actually took the Leader of the Opposition bringing this motion to the House, although he gave notice of it 2 weeks ago, for that letter to be tabled in the Legislative Council. Now, members may or may not be aware, but that letter was tabled in the Legislative Assembly yesterday. Now, it's interesting how it was obviously appropriate for the Legislative Assembly to be acquainted with this correspondence to the Honourable Mark McGowan from Chief Health Officer Dr Andy Robertson on the 28th of October yesterday, but it was only in response to the Leader of the Opposition's motion that the Legislative Council is worthy of having access to such information. And notwithstanding the fact that we actually have a Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Health. We actually have 3 Parliamentary Secretaries in this chamber, and she's the only one, the hard-working, the Honourable Alana Clossy, who actually represents a minister in the other place, and actually from time to time does some work in the Legislative Council with respect to that representative capacity. And I'm not quite sure why the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Health couldn't have equally given the Legislative Council the opportunity of tabling this letter dated the 28th of October yesterday, in line with that being tabled in the Legislative Assembly. So, Madam Acting President, the government has already been given 2 weeks' notice of this matter, and the motion, as members will be aware, provides another 7 days. So it'll be 3 weeks. Actually, it may even be a little over 3 weeks in total that the government will have. The House has listened to the concerns of the Leader of the House and the Leader of the Government, the Honourable Sue Ellery, in narrowing the scope of this motion, which strangely was opposed by the government, which I'm sure is something that I'm not sure that will ever work out. Now, I think the Honourable Peter Collier probably could have gone further and expanded the scope to a period of greater than 7 days, but I think he's been quite reserved in focusing this motion just to this period in time, which is the 13th of October to the 20th of October. Now, Madam Acting President, I'm sure that this is something that in considering the preparation, drafting of this motion and then giving notice of this motion back on the 22nd of October, that the Honourable Peter Collier didn't do lightly. Ordering a member of the House to do certain things is not something that you do regularly. It's rather irregular. And in fact, I think in my 7.5 years in this place, I can only recall one other occasion when a member of this place has been ordered to produce by motion of the chamber. I think it has been given considerable consideration, Madam Acting President, and I think it has arisen from many weeks and months of seeking information from the government, and I know all members who aren't government members have been seeking information around the COVID-19 response, and the answers have been significantly lacking. Now, Madam Acting President, I've spoken in other debates, and I think this motion flows on from a motion moved by the Honourable Peter Collier. I think it was back in June or July. I'm mistaken. I can't recall right now the exact month, but where the Leader of the House was requested to provide information, and that information was provided following that motion. Now, I'm not sure that all information was provided to this chamber from that request. And I asked a series of questions following that time about what information had or had not been provided. And it became clear, very clear from the very early stages that those 140 odd pages were tabled. And noting most of them were web pages from the federal government. Most of them were the advice of the AHPPC, which when it provides advice to government, it publishes that advice. Unlike the arrangements here in Western Australia, where it relies on a minister in the other place or the leader of the opposition in this place to move a motion or to table a document or to answer a question for information to be provided. I'm not aware, and I'm happy to stand corrected, if there's a place where I can go to called Chief Health Officer of Western Australia.wa.gov.au, and I can access all of the advice that the Chief Health Officer and perhaps others have provided to government with respect to its COVID-19 response and its COVID-19 decisions. Now, I, along with two other members in the Honourable Alison Xamon and the Honourable Zac Kirkup, have received, I probably wouldn't say regular, but from time to time, briefings from the Chief Health Officer as well as representatives of the Minister for Health. And those briefings have been valuable, and I appreciate the time that has been afforded to the three of us as spokespersons for health for our respective parties, and it's a good opportunity for us to hear directly from the Chief Health Officer, to be able to ask questions of the Chief Health Officer, which is a privilege which most other members of Parliament, I suspect, wouldn't and haven't been afforded. And there is information, and I know on a recent occasion where this group sought some visibility on what the state calls outbreak response plans. And so these are the plans that have been developed by government, which deal with planning and preparedness for an outbreak in certain sections of our community, Madam Acting President. And there are a number of plans that have been developed, and I'd like to list them. They are the WA Integrated Outbreak Response and Containment Plan, the Remote Aboriginal Community Outbreak Response Plan, the Residential Aged Care Facility Outbreak Response Plan, Prison Outbreak Response Plan, the Hospital Outbreak Response Plan, the School and Childcare Service Outbreak Response Plan, the Mining and Offshore Facilities Outbreak Response Plan, the Commercial Vessels Outbreak Response Plan, the Congregate Living Outbreak Response Plan, and the Industrial Facilities, including Abattoirs Response Plan. Now, members, I'd be interested to know if any of you have had an opportunity to consider any or all of those outbreak response plans. And I would be surprised if any of you have, because these response plans are top secrets of the state. They are highly classified documents, notwithstanding the list of key stakeholders that have been engaged would number thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not maybe hundreds of thousands of people across those sectors. These are top state secrets which we still do not have access to. And we even asked, as the Honourable Alison Xamon suggested, whether this very small group of three members, three trusted members of the Liberal Party, the Greens and the Nationals could see a sample of one of the plans, so we could understand the scope, the depth, the planning and the preparedness that has gone into considering how the government might respond to an outbreak. No. These plans are far too secret, Madam Acting President, for anyone to see other than government. And it does concern me, Madam Acting President, because when you look through, particularly the parliamentary questions in this place, and I've literally got reams and reams of them here, time and time again, when I've sought information, largely in relation to the health response, but sometimes in relation to the police response. I am not allowed to, and the Parliament is not allowed to access this information because it is Cabinet in confidence. It is Cabinet in confidence. And if members aren't aware, what's been happening rather unusually is when a state of emergency is declared by the Minister for Emergency Services, a group or an entity called the State Disaster Council is activated. And the State Disaster Council has a very important role under our emergency management arrangements. And part of its responsibility is to receive situational briefings and other briefings in relation to the disaster in which it is managing under the Emergency Management Act. Now, what this government has been doing rather sneakily, Madam Acting President, is they have been convening the State Disaster Council concurrently with the Security and Emergency Committee of Cabinet. So they have effectively merged an entity that exists under the Emergency Management Act called the State Disaster Council with a subcommittee of Cabinet, and therefore anything it sees, does, speaks, hears or considers is Cabinet in confidence. To the extent where I've asked for the minutes of the meeting, keeping in mind that the statutory members of this of the State Disaster Council are the Premier, who chairs, the Minister for Emergency Services and the State Emergency Coordinator. And the other members who have been appointed to the State Disaster Council are the Deputy Premier, the Minister for Education, Police, Ports, Attorney General, Citizenship, Multicultural Interests, Transport, Innovation, ICT, and the Director General of the Department of the Premier and Cabinet as an Executive Officer, and on subsequent dates the Public Sector Commissioner and the Minister for Local Government and the Treasurer. So it's got rather wieldily over time, Madam Acting President, to almost encompass all of Cabinet. And we heard from the Leader of the House herself today, which talked about the regularity of this group meeting. I think she said sometimes it was daily, sometimes it was more frequently than that. And she also said it was immediately following a meeting of National Cabinet that this group would come together and make decisions following National Cabinet. Now, Madam Acting President, I don't think I would stand here today supporting a motion of this calibre if the government was providing information transparently to the Parliament, but more importantly to the community of Western Australia. Madam Acting President, I think that there are some other speakers on this motion, so I'll try not to take all of the time that's allocated to me. But there is something that I want to talk about, and I did talk about previously in the motion prior to this by the Honourable Peter Collier, and that was with respect to the formation of a special inquiry. And it was something that I raised, and in fact I tabled a document in this chamber on the 10th of June 2020, table paper 3933, which was during my contribution to the Honourable Peter Collier's earlier motion relating to this. And I tabled correspondence between the Premier and the Honourable Mia Davies, Leader of the National Party. And the Premier was responding to the call of the Nationals with respect to the initiation of a special inquiry under the Public Sector Management Act. And at that time, the Honourable Mia Davies was calling for a special inquiry to be constituted following the cessation of a state of emergency declaration. Now, this was back in May of this year, Madam Acting President. I think what we probably have now come to learn since those earlier stages of the response is that we're likely to be in a state of emergency for many months, perhaps even years ahead. And in fact, we'll be debating a COVID-19 urgent bill perhaps sometime this afternoon, Madam Acting President, extending the powers of state with respect to the COVID-19 response. Madam Acting President, if I can finish on this point. This motion and the sentiments expressed have nothing to do with the integrity and the independence of the Chief Health Officer. I hold Dr. Andrew Robertson in high regard. I trust him and I trust his advice. I have no reason to not. What I don't trust is the information that is being filtered and kept and distributed when it suits the government. That is where my mistrust lies. And if I can finish on this point, at one of the earliest engagements with the Chief Health Officer, he said something which has stood with me to this day, and something that I recount regularly. And he said this: "The sooner we learn to live with this virus, the better." I'm certain that I have not misquoted the Chief Health Officer, and I'm sure the other members who were at that briefing would be able to confirm that they were the earliest words of the Chief Health Officer with respect to how the state should respond and consider its response to the pandemic. Madam Acting President, this motion has my full support and the support of my party.